Hey humans, welcome to Read to Me, Matt Dunn. I'm Matt Dunn, and I already have a book in my hand. And I'm going to read to you. You know what we're reading. We're reading Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. We're on chapter 18, part 2. Ooh, Darcy and them are dancing, and Elizabeth, and this guy comes in. He's clearly drunk. He sounds like it, right? And he's like, yo, let me get a squeeze of that tush. And he's like squeezing up on Elizabeth, and she's like, get the fuck off me. And he's like, okay. He just like walks off, right? That's what happened? Or maybe that, no, that's not what happened. Don't ignore my recap. Anyway, we're on part 2, chapter 18. The latter part of this address, he says, who's the braiding me, you know? The latter part of this address was scarcely heard by Darcy, but Sir William's allusion to his friend seemed to strike him forcibly, and his eyes were directed with a very serious expression toward Bingley and Jane, who were dancing together. Recovering himself, however, shortly, he turned to his partner and said, Sir William's interruption has made me forget what we were talking about. Elizabeth says, I do not think we were speaking at all. Sir William could not have interrupted any two people in the room who had less to say for themselves. We have tried 2 or 3 subjects already without success. And what are we to talk of next? I cannot imagine. What think of you books? What think you of books? Said he, smiling. Books? Oh! No. I am sure we never read the same, or not with the same feelings. I'm sorry you think so. But if that could be the case, there can at least be no want of subject. We may compare our different opinions. No, I cannot talk of books in a ballroom. My head is always full of something else. The present always occupies you in such scenes, does it? Said he with a look of doubt. Yes, always, she replied without knowing what she said, for her thoughts had wandered far from the subject, as soon afterwards appeared by her suddenly exclaiming, I remember hearing you once say, Mr. Darcy, that you hardly ever forgave, that your resentment, once created, was unappeasable. You are very cautious, I suppose, as to its being created? I am, he said in a firm voice. And never allow yourself to be blinded by prejudice? I hope not. It is particularly incumbent on those who never change their opinion to be secure of judging properly at first. May I ask what these questions tend? Merely to the illustration of your character, she said, endeavoring to shake off her gravity. I am trying to make it out. Somebody wants to make it out, if you know what I mean. And what is your success? She shook her head. I do not get on at all. I hear such different accounts of you as puzzle me. What? She shook her head. I do not get on at all. I hear such different accounts of you as puzzle me exceedingly. I can readily believe, answered he gravely, that reports may vary greatly with respect to me, and I could wish, Miss Bennet, that you were not to sketch my character at the present moment, as there is reason to fear that the performance would reflect no credit on either. But if I do not take your likeness now, I may never have another opportunity. I would by no means suspend any pleasure of yours, he coldly replied. She said no more, and they went down the other dance and parted in silence, on each side dissatisfied, though not to an equal degree. For in Darcy's breast there was a tolerable, powerful feeling toward her, which soon procured her pardon, and directed all his anger against another. They had not long separated when Miss Bingley came toward her, and with an expression of civil disdain thus accosted her. "So, Miss Eliza, I hear you are quite delighted with George Wickham. Your sister has been talking to me about him and asking me 1,000 questions, and I find that the young man forgot to tell you among his other communications that he was the son of old Wickham, the late Mr. Darcy's steward." She's like, yeah, I know. "Let me recommend you, however, as a friend, not to give implicit confidence to all his assertions. For as to Mr. Darcy's using him ill, it is perfectly false. For on the contrary, he has been always remarkably kind to him, though George Wickham has treated Mr. Darcy in a most infamous manner. I do not know the particulars, but I know very well that Mr. Darcy is not in the least to blame, that he cannot bear to hear George Wickham mentioned, and that though my brother thought he could not well avoid including him in his invitation to the officers, he was excessively glad to find that he had not taken himself out of the way. His coming into the country at all is the most insolent thing indeed, and I wonder how he could presume to do it. I pity you, Miss Eliza, for this discovery of your favourite's guilt, but really, considering his descent, one could not expect much better." What the fuck is she saying? His guilt and his descent appear... This is Eliza. "His guilt and his descent appear by your account to be the same," said Elizabeth angrily. "For I have heard you accuse him of nothing worse than of being the son of Mr. Darcy's steward, and of that, I can assure you, he informed me himself." "I beg your pardon," replied Miss Bingley, turning away with a sneer. "Excuse my interference. It was kindly meant." "Insolent girl," said Elizabeth to herself. "You are much mistaken if you expect to influence me by such a paltry attack as this. I see nothing in it but your own wilful ignorance and the malice of Mr. Darcy." She then sought her eldest sister, who had undertaken to make inquiries on the same subject of Bingley. Jane met her with a smile of such sweet complacency, a glow of such happy expression, as successfully marked how well she was satisfied with the occurrences of the evening. Elizabeth instantly read her feelings, and at that moment solicitude for Wickham, resentment against his enemies, and everything else gave way before the hope of Jane's being in the fairest way for happiness. "I want to know," she said, with a countenance no less smiling than her sister's, "what you have learnt about Mr. Wickham. But perhaps you have been too pleasantly engaged to think of any third person, in which case you may be sure of my pardon." "Pardon." "No," replied Jane. "I have not forgotten him, but I have nothing satisfactory to tell you. Mr. Bingley does not know the whole of his history, and is quite ignorant of the circumstances which have principally offended Mr. Darcy, but he will vouch for the good conduct, the probity and honour of his friend, and is perfectly convinced that Mr. Wickham has deserved much less attention from Mr. Darcy than he has received. And I am sorry to say that by his account as well as his sister's, Mr. Wickham is by no means a respectable young man. I am afraid he has been very imprudent, and has deserved to lose Mr. Darcy's regard." "Mr. Bingley does not know Mr. Wickham herself." himself. No, he never saw him till the other morning at Meryton. This account, then, is what he has received from Mr. Darcy. I am perfectly satisfied. But what does he say of the living? The living. Oh, and what does he say about the living? And we'll find out at part 3. Part 3. Part 3. We're going to go to part 3. Part 3. Part 3. We're going to go to part 3. Hey, if you want me to keep reading, please check out some more of my videos. But you know what? I'm going to tell you this right now. I'm not going to stop reading, even if you don't check out my videos. I'm just going to, can't stop, won't stop. Boom. Please hit the like button if you want to like my stuff. And if you don't like it, then you can hit the unlike button, I guess. Ah, that would hurt. But you know what? It's reality. And give me some likes and, damn it, comment if you want to comment. Get the subscribe button to subscribe, and I hope I see you tomorrow. Have a good day.